You look like you could use a pork bun.
Alright, quick question for everybody. Who remembers the year 2012? You know, the year when the world was apparently supposed to end, the first Avengers film came out, and of course a lot of iconic and memorable video games were released. We're talking BioWare's epic conclusion to the Mass Effect trilogy with Mass Effect 3, Arkane's Dishonored, Telltale's The Walking Dead, all of them such fantastic games released. And of course, how could we forget Lollipop Chainsaw?
You pervert!
With all these great games, there are bound to be a few just swept under the rug and forgotten about. The developers trampled on by studios like BioWare, Telltale and Ubisoft. Well, over the past couple of years, I've been unearthing some of these long forgotten gems, and out of all of those I've experienced, I'd say that Sleeping Dogs is the one that kept coming into the spotlight the most. So what exactly is Sleeping Dogs? Well, it's a third-person, open-world action-adventure game developed by the now defunct United Front Games. Originally, this game was penned to be a part of the long-forgotten True Crime series and was titled True Crime Hong Kong. However, the project was cancelled in 2011 by Activision due to numerous delays with the game. It looked like the game was to join the cancelled games graveyard, but then a saviour appeared in the form of the now NFT-obsessed Square Enix. Or Enix, how do you actually pronounce that? They purchased the rights to True Crime Hong Kong, rebranded it to Sleeping Dogs, and released it in 2012 to positive reviews. I would say that as far as open world games go, Sleeping Dogs doesn't stray too far from the formula. You can run, punch, shoot, drive, all the basic stuff that you can easily pick up on. However, Sleeping Dogs does do a few things differently. One of these is the larger emphasis on melee combat instead of shooting. The developers were inspired by classic martial arts films and wanted to replicate the fighting in the game. The combat is challenging, but also satisfying, never feeling frustrating or like a chore to play. On top of that, it's also quite easy to grasp as well. The combat mostly boils down to 3 buttons. Your square or X button is your light attack, you can also hold it for a heavy. Your triangle or your Y button is your counter, and your circle or your B button is your grapple attack. Each punch, kick, counter and also broken bone feel brutal and satisfying to watch and listen to. The combat does offer variety as the game progresses. Different enemy types will force the player to change their tactics. They might not be able to grapple an enemy but can land blows due to their lack of defense. Other enemies may have deadly weapons such as cleavers and knives, making the player prioritize them first to salvage some health that they might have lost. It's this kind of variety that keeps the combat engaging and fun despite the similar encounters you'll have. Before a fight, I would also recommend seeking out food and drinks in the world. You can get those from different vendors that you'll come across. Each one will give you different buffs for a short period. For example, a Dragon Kick soda will give you increased damage, or a pork bun will give you health regen over time.
Why don't you have a pork bun in your hand?
But perhaps the best feature of the combat, and the one that everyone seems to gush over in this game, has to be the environmental takedowns. In fights you'll see certain objects highlighted. Once you drag an enemy over to it, you can press the grapple button to initiate a brutal and also sometimes comedic takedown, which kills them instantly. I will say that part of me does wish that there were more of these available in fights. However, I understand why the developers didn't include them everywhere, as it can make combat seem quite easy, especially when they are an instant kill. Car combat is also a thing in this game. Whilst driving, you can press the square or X button to ram into other cars either in front or to the side of you. Do this a few times and the car will be destroyed. This simple mechanic makes the various chases you do in the game fun. Other open world crime games have you simply hide or outrun pursuers and don't really offer any other unique ways. But thankfully United Front decided against that and introduced something new. However, using the ram can make these pursuits a bit too easy, especially when the police are on your tail. When you have a wanted level, you'll naturally have the police pursuing you. What you could do is outrun the circle on the minimap and try your luck escaping them. Or you could use a ram feature to destroy all the cop cars and have your wanted level just go like that. Like the environmental takedowns, it can make the game too easy and not have any challenges for experienced players, but I won't deny that it is really fun to just ram into people on the road. The last piece of the combat puzzle is the gunplay. The game adopts a lot of typical third-person shooting features like cover and fine aim. However, similar to the car and melee combat, the developers have added something new to the formula. When in cover, if you press the cross or A button and hold the L2 or RT button, you'll vault over your cover and enter a bullet time mode. This gives you more precision with weapons to better kill enemies for a short period of time. You can also use this feature whenever you can in firefights, and unlike the vehicle combat, it doesn't feel like a cheap and easy way to win the game. As for the gunplay itself, it's certainly serviceable and also fun, but it doesn't feel the smoothest at times, with some shots not landing where I would like them to be or where the cursor is, and hipfire doesn't really work that well. You can tell the developers put a lot more emphasis on the melee combat, and it shows, because the gunplay is definitely the least satisfying part to play. With all these features at your disposal, you're going to want a great playground to use them in. Luckily, Sleeping Dogs has you covered. The Hong Kong in the game is a vibrant, lively and beautifully detailed rendition of the iconic Chinese city. NPCs and cars populate the world everywhere you look, from city streets to motorways and even residential areas and back alleys. There is always some walk of life. Whilst it's not as interactive as I may have liked it to be, it's still enough to make this city feel alive. I also appreciate the inclusion of different districts you can visit too. The area you start in, which is called North Point, has this grungy and poor feeling to it, filled with back alleys and the incredibly loud night market. Compare this with the Central District, which has a much higher class feeling with fast cars, fancy shops to visit and no audio sensory overload. So yeah, the city's pretty, it's lively, but what can you actually do in it? Well, quite a lot. When you're not fighting, shooting, killing or maiming people, you have a bunch of different activities to try out. The first is street racing, which is exactly what you think it is. I'd probably say this is my least favourite one, as there's just simply too many of them. There are 15 races in total, not including DLC, and each one just boils down to getting into first place and staying there until the end. However, you can actually use the car combat in these races, which does give you a nice advantage and, as mentioned before, can be a lot of fun. The only problem is, you can only do it in a car. The bikes and the boats don't allow you to use that combat, so they're a bit poor in comparison. Then you have gambling, which is essentially just mini games to gain some extra cash. It's a bit mundane, but hey, if you want to put some money down on cockfighting, go right ahead. Then there are the martial arts clubs you can take part in, which test your combat skill against a lot of enemies. It's basically a Bruce Lee simulator, but hey, fun. And then finally, karaoke. You can also learn new combat moves from your old martial arts teacher after returning one of their stolen statues. Yep, there are collectibles in this game. However, Sleeping Dogs does do something different with them. They actually give you benefits. Well, some of them at least. Jade statues will allow you to unlock new fighting moves, whereas health shrines give you more health. However, lockboxes and spy cameras don't really give you any rewards besides money, and they are a bit of a pain to collect, especially the 100 lockboxes across all districts. There is a feature to get them to show on your map by going on one of the many dates in the game. However, what's weird is that when you collect one, the icon doesn't disappear and instead it turns white? This is most strange considering that the icon is grey if you haven't collected it, which led to some often frustrating moments in my playthrough, especially when I was trying to figure out which ones I have done and which ones I haven't done. I would only really do the collectibles if you are one of these kind of gamers that wants to go for 100%. Otherwise, just do the ones that matter and leave the ones that are pointless. As I mentioned, you'll get these as you progress through the game by going on dates with women you'll meet in the story. One mission and it'll be displayed on the map. Easy. Oh, and speaking of the story. For this section, we will try and keep spoilers to a minimum. In Sleeping Dogs, players will take on the role of Wei Shen, an undercover cop posing as a criminal to get into the Sun On Yee triad. After doing a few jobs, Wei gets enough trust and becomes a member of the gang. However, throughout the story, Wei's loyalties to the triad and also the police force are tested. Will he stick to his duty, or will he be consumed by this life of crime? The premise that I've described sounds quite interesting. A man torn between criminals that treat him like family, or his morals of what's right and wrong. As I progressed through the story, I was under the impression that everything would come to a head in the last act of the game, that there would be a choice we would have to make. Do you want to be a triad, or do you want to be a cop? Except everything gets thrown out at the last minute to conclude the story. All that build up and intrigue as to what Wei would do just evaporates into thin air by the final few missions. I also think that there should have been more built on Wei's loyalty with both factions. With the Sun On Yee, it feels like he has a family, and with the police he has a duty. Both of these conflicts could have used a bit more clashing to raise the stakes, and that coupled with a more satisfying resolution could have made this story incredible. However, I will say that thanks to the engaging gameplay, this didn't make the ending any less fun to play through. The story also offers up some memorable characters thanks to excellent performances by the cast. Characters such as the naive and young Jackie to the old and wise Uncle Po, each character has something to give that will make you remember them. Even minor characters like Mrs. Q stick with you long past the credits.
You're going to vote for Lee, you hear me? You don't, we're gonna fuck you. All your ancestors and
Although sometimes I will admit it is a bit hard to keep track of the characters and what gang their allegiances with without doing some extra research. And then there's the man of the hour, Wei Shen. He's a brutal badass who commits some truly cold and shocking stuff. You get the feeling that this guy is not to be messed with. However, it's what's underneath his exterior that stands out the most. He's a broken man who has been shaped by the losses of his past. All through the game you get a sense that he wants to do the right thing for all sides involved and isn't afraid to speak up when needed. Through it all, his constant attempts to save those he cares for are admirable, even though at times futile, but you still root for him to come out on top. Overall, a great protagonist. Finally, I was quite surprised to see just how much talent was involved with this. Established actors such as Will Young Lee and Tom Wilkinson, to even A-listers like Lucy Liu and Emma Stone, all play a part in bringing this world to life. However, some of these actors aren't actually utilised to their full potential. Take Emma Stone for example, who plays one of the many girlfriends that you'll encounter. You meet her on a mission that kinda makes it look like she'll be key to the story, perhaps even a love interest for Wei, but no. Instead, you take her out on a date after the mission and never hear from her again. What was the point in using the budget for someone like Emma Stone if she's not going to be a major part? Lucy Liu also suffers the same fate, albeit she has more involvement with the story, but only appears towards the end for about 3 missions. Again, wasted potential. As I played the definitive edition of the game, it came with all of the 3 story DLC packs. The first one I played through was the Zodiac Tournament, a martial arts tournament on an island where you'll compete to be crowned the champion. Each mission has its challenges, starting with a simple 1 versus 3 or 5 enemies, to fighting a boss while being drugged. There's a lot of variety. I also really like how it's played out like an old Chinese martial arts movie. The developers were clearly embracing the inspiration for the game. Overall, a good package. Then there is Nightmare in North Point, where an old Triad member called Smiley Cat has come back from the dead to destroy the Sun On Yee as revenge. One of your one-date only girlfriends is kidnapped and you'll have to rescue her from Smiley Cat and his Jiangshi, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this, which is basically an undead vampire creature from Chinese folklore that hops around and if I'm honest it kind of looks goofy, I'm sorry. I think that this DLC is good. It has a lot of new enemy variety and power-ups that you can use to defeat them and save Hong Kong. Another good package. The final DLC package is called Year of the Snake, and if I'm honest, it's the weakest of the three. In this one, Wei uncovers a cult that believes the apocalypse is coming on the eve of the new year. You'll have to uncover the secrets of the cult and put a stop to them. Maybe it's because I dislike cult stories in media, but I really couldn't get into this one as much as the others. It also didn't help that nothing new was added that wasn't different from the base game, unlike the other DLC packages that were mentioned before. I'd probably say play this one first just to get it out of the way, and then enjoy the other two. Sleeping Dogs to me is an example of a truly underrated game, and it deserves as much love and attention as we can give it. Whilst not everything new works as well as the developers had hoped it would, and the story could have done with a few more tweaks and expansions, it is truly a satisfying and fun thrill ride from start to finish. The melee combat and environmental takedowns are so satisfying every time, and the open world and characters have so much detail and charm to them that you can't help but wanting to revisit. It's unfortunate that United Front never got to make the sequel, because from what I've read online, it sounded heavily ambitious and intriguing. All we can do is just share this game with as many people and hope one day we get to take a trip back to the brutal and wacky world of this overlooked gem.